Her silence was mistaken for weakness until she solved the impossible equation that left everyone speechless. In a bustling high school classroom, the air was thick with anticipation. The late afternoon sun filtered through dusty blinds, casting long shadows across rows of desks filled with students eager to escape the monotony of another day at Westbridge High. At the front of the room stood Mr. Peterson, a wiry man in his late 40s with thinning hair and an unshakable confidence that often bordered on arrogance. He had a reputation for being both brilliant and cruel, particularly when it came to mathematics. Sitting quietly near the back of the class was Emily Carter, a seemingly ordinary girl who blended into the crowd like wallpaper. She wasn't part of any cliques, didn't excel in sports or drama, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. To most of her peers, she was invisible, a simple woman whose life revolved around books, modest dreams, and keeping her head down. But today, all of that was about to change. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat dramatically as he wrote a complex calculus problem on the chalkboard. "All right, class," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's see if anyone has what it takes to solve this little puzzle I've prepared." His eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on each student before settling on Emily. A sly grin spread across his face. "Emily, why don't you come up here and give it a shot?" The entire class erupted into murmurs. Some snickered. Others exchanged knowing glances. It was no secret that Mr. Peterson enjoyed singling out students he deemed underachievers to embarrass them publicly. And Emily, with her quiet demeanor and unassuming presence, seemed like the perfect target. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room trained on her, scrutinizing her every move. Slowly, she rose from her seat, clutching her notebook tightly against her chest as though it might shield her from the storm brewing around her. Her steps were hesitant but deliberate as she made her way to the front of the class. When she reached the board, Mr. Peterson handed her the chalk with a flourish, as though presenting her with some great honor. "Go ahead, Emily," he said, his tone laced with mockery. "Show us how much you've learned." The problem on the board was daunting. A triple integral involving spherical coordinates, something even the brightest students in the class found challenging. Most of them assumed Emily wouldn't stand a chance. After all, she'd never raised her hand during discussions, never volunteered answers, and certainly never given anyone reason to believe she possessed extraordinary mathematical talent. But as Emily stared at the equation, something shifted in her expression. The initial panic faded, replaced by a calm focus that caught everyone off guard. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, without hesitation, she picked up the chalk and began writing. The classroom, once buzzing with low murmurs of anticipation and snickers, fell into an eerie silence as Emily began to write. At first, no one paid much attention. After all, it wasn't uncommon for students called upon by Mr. Peterson to scrawl something half-heartedly on the board before admitting defeat. But within seconds, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Emily's movements were deliberate, her strokes fluid yet precise. Each symbol she wrote seemed to hum with purpose, like notes in a symphony that only she could hear. The initial smirks from the audience faded, replaced by furrowed brows and tilted heads as they tried to follow what was happening. At the front of the room, Mr. Peterson leaned back slightly, his arms crossed over his chest. He had intended this moment to be one of ridicule, a chance to mock a student he assumed wouldn't know the difference between a derivative and an integral. Yet, as Emily worked through the problem, his expression hardened. His eyes darted between the chalkboard and the girl standing before it, disbelief creeping into his features. For someone who prided himself on being the smartest person in the room, this unfolding scene felt unsettling. It was as if Emily had stepped out of some hidden dimension where math was not just understood but lived. Meanwhile, the students watched in stunned fascination. Jake Thompson, the star quarterback known more for his biceps than his brain, whispered loudly to his friend beside him, Is she actually doing it?" His tone carried equal parts awe and confusion. Others nodded silently, their pens frozen mid-air above notebooks, forgotten in the wake of what they were witnessing. Even Sarah Collins, the self-proclaimed valedictorian in waiting, couldn't tear her gaze away from the board. She'd spent hours poring over similar problems during study sessions, yet here was Emily, someone who had never so much as raised her hand in class, solving them effortlessly. What made the spectacle even more astonishing was how Emily approached the problem. Instead of blindly following the steps outlined in their textbook or mimicking the methods Mr. Peterson had drilled into them, she took a creative route. She simplified the triple integral by converting it into spherical coordinates, breaking down the intimidating equation into manageable pieces. Her method was elegant, almost poetic, and completely unorthodox compared to anything the class had seen before. It was as though she saw mathematics not as a rigid set of rules, but as a language, one she spoke fluently. As Emily continued writing, small gasps rippled through the room. Some students exchanged glances, unsure whether to cheer or remain silent. They weren't used to seeing brilliance unfold right in front of them, especially not from someone like Emily. To most, she was invisible, a quiet presence at the back of the room who blended seamlessly into the background. Now, however, she commanded every ounce of their attention. Every stroke of the chalk elicited another wave of shock, each calculation bringing her closer to the final solution. When Emily reached the last step, she paused briefly, double-checking her work. This momentary hesitation sent a ripple of tension through the room. Had she made a mistake? Was there still room for doubt? But then, without ceremony, she wrote the final answer. A clean, concise number that seemed almost anticlimactic given the complexity of the journey required to reach it. Turning around, she faced the class, her expression calm and composed, betraying none of the nervousness she must have felt inside. For a few seconds, absolute silence reigned. Then, as if unable to contain themselves any longer, whispers erupted. Did she really just do that? Someone muttered incredulously. Another voice chimed in, louder this time. That's insane. Slowly, the murmurs grew into applause. Tentative at first, but soon building into a thunderous ovation. Students clapped fervently, some even rising to their feet. The energy in the room transformed entirely, shifting from mockery and skepticism to admiration and respect. Even Mr. Peterson, who had orchestrated this entire scenario intending to embarrass Emily, found himself momentarily speechless. His lips parted as though he wanted to say something, perhaps to congratulate her, perhaps to challenge her, but no words came out. Instead, he simply stood there, staring at the board, processing what had just transpired. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he cleared his throat and said, "Well, I suppose that's correct." His voice lacked its usual confidence, and there was a faint tremor beneath his words. Whether it stemmed from embarrassment, admiration, or sheer astonishment, no one could tell. But the real magic happened afterward. As Emily returned to her seat, clutching her notebook tightly against her chest, she noticed something remarkable. People were looking at her differently. No longer was she the invisible girl relegated to the fringes of social dynamics. Now she was the center of attention, not because she sought it, but because she had earned it. Classmates who had previously ignored her now leaned toward her, eager to ask questions about the problem she had solved. One boy even slid his notebook across the aisle, asking shyly if she could explain how she converted the integral into spherical coordinates. Emily hesitated for a moment, surprised by the sudden interest, but then nodded and began explaining patiently. This newfound recognition extended beyond the confines of the classroom. By lunchtime, word of Emily's feat had spread throughout the school. In the cafeteria, groups of students huddled together, whispering excitedly about the calculus genius who had shocked everyone. Teachers who had passed her in the hallways without a second glance now greeted her warmly, offering encouragement and praise. Even the principal stopped her briefly between classes to express his admiration, saying, "We're lucky to have someone like you at Westbridge." Yet, despite the whirlwind of attention, Emily remained grounded. She didn't revel in the spotlight or let the accolades inflate her ego. If anything, she seemed humbled by the experience, grateful for the opportunity to prove herself. For years, she had kept her talents hidden, fearing judgment or rejection. She had convinced herself that blending in was safer than standing out. But today, she realized that staying silent wasn't serving her, it was holding her back. Solving that calculus problem hadn't just silenced her critics, it had given her permission to embrace her true potential. By the end of the day, Emily's life had changed irrevocably. What started as a cruel attempt to mock her had turned into a defining moment of triumph. She walked home that evening with her head held high, the weight of invisibility lifted from her shoulders. And though she knew challenges lay ahead, she also knew one thing for certain: she would never underestimate herself again. The ripple effects of Emily's unexpected triumph in Mr. Peterson's calculus class were far-reaching, permeating every corner of her life. The following days unfolded like a transformation scene in a coming-of-age story, only this time, it wasn't fiction. It was real. For years, Emily had lived quietly, content to remain unnoticed and unremarked upon. But now, she found herself thrust into the spotlight, not because she sought it, but because her brilliance demanded recognition. What followed was a journey of redemption, not just for Emily, but for those around her who had misjudged her. At school, the change was immediate and profound. Teachers who had previously overlooked Emily began to take notice of her potential. Mrs. Alvarez, the AP physics teacher, approached her after class one day with an invitation to join the honors program. "Emily," she said earnestly, "you have a gift. I'd love to see you challenge yourself further." It was a moment that filled Emily with both pride and relief. For so long, she had doubted whether anyone would ever see beyond her quiet exterior. Now she felt validated, not as someone who simply blended into the background, but as a student capable of achieving greatness. Her newfound visibility also opened doors she hadn't even considered before. The debate club advisor, Mr. Reynolds, encouraged her to try out for the team, citing her ability to think critically and articulate complex ideas clearly. Though hesitant at first, debate seemed worlds away from her comfort zone. Emily decided to give it a shot. To her surprise, she excelled. Her logical reasoning skills, honed through countless hours of solving equations and grappling with abstract concepts, translated seamlessly into persuasive arguments. By the end of the semester, she had become one of the team's most valuable members, earning accolades at regional competitions. Each victory reinforced her confidence, proving to herself that her talents weren't confined to mathematics alone. But perhaps the most significant shift occurred in her relationships with her peers. Gone were the days when Emily sat alone during lunch, her nose buried in a book while others laughed and chatted nearby. Now, students actively sought her out, not just for help with homework, but simply to talk. They wanted to know more about her, what inspired her passion for math, how she managed to stay so calm under pressure, and whether she had always been this smart. At first, Emily struggled to adjust to the attention. She wasn't used to being the center of conversation, and the constant questions made her feel vulnerable. Yet, over time, she came to appreciate these interactions. They reminded her that people weren't inherently cruel. They were merely curious. By sharing pieces of herself, she allowed others to see her as more than just the quiet girl. Her role as a tutor also deepened her connection with her classmates. Many students who had once dismissed her as unremarkable now relied on her guidance to navigate challenging subjects. One afternoon, Jake Thompson, the same star quarterback who had once teased her for being too shy to speak up, approached her hesitantly after school. "Hey, do you think you could help me with trigonometry?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. Emily smiled softly and nodded. Over the next few weeks, she worked patiently with him, breaking down concepts until they clicked. When Jake finally aced a test he had been dreading, he thanked her with genuine gratitude. "You're amazing, you know that," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. In moments like these, Emily realized that her knowledge wasn't just a tool for personal success. It was a gift she could share to uplift others. Even Mr. Peterson, the man who had initially set out to humiliate her, underwent a subtle transformation. While he never openly admitted fault, his behavior toward Emily changed noticeably. During lessons, he occasionally glanced in her direction, as if seeking approval or confirmation, when presenting particularly difficult problems. Once, after dismissing the class, he lingered behind and handed her a sheet of advanced integrals. "I thought you might find these interesting," he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact. Emily accepted the paper with a small smile, recognizing the gesture for what it was: an olive branch. Whether driven by guilt, admiration, or a combination of both, Mr. Peterson had begun treating her with a level of respect he rarely extended to other students. Their dynamic remained formal, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now, one rooted in mutual acknowledgement of intellectual capability. Beyond the walls of Westridge High, Emily's influence extended into the broader community. Inspired by her own experiences, she started volunteering at a local library, tutoring younger children in math and science. These sessions became some of her favorite moments each week. Watching young minds light up with comprehension reminded her of why she loved learning in the first place. She took particular joy in working with kids who reminded her of herself, shy, uncertain, and underestimated by those around them. Through patient encouragement and gentle guidance, she helped them discover their strengths, instilling in them the belief that intelligence isn't defined by volume or visibility. One Saturday morning, a little girl named Mia approached Emily after their session, clutching a worksheet covered in scribbles and half-erased numbers. "Miss Emily," she whispered shyly, "do you think I'm good at math?" Emily knelt down to meet her at eye level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Mia," she said warmly, "you're better than you think. Just keep practicing, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl beamed, hugging Emily tightly before running off to show her parents her work. Moments like these reaffirmed Emily's purpose. She wasn't just teaching math. She was empowering others to believe in themselves. Back home, Emily's family noticed the changes too. Her younger brother, Alex, often pestered her to explain the theories she was studying, marveling at her ability to make complicated topics sound simple. Their parents, though not particularly academic themselves, beamed with pride whenever they heard stories about her accomplishments. "We always knew you were special," her mother said one evening, squeezing her hand affectionately. "Now everyone else knows it too." Yet, despite all the external validation, Emily's greatest victory lay within herself. She had spent years doubting her worth, convinced that staying silent and invisible was the safest path. But through solving that calculus problem, and everything that followed, she learned to embrace her voice and her gifts. She realized that brilliance doesn't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, it speaks loudest when it's unexpected. And while she still preferred quiet moments with her books over raucous social gatherings, she no longer shied away from opportunities to shine. In the months that followed, Emily continued to grow, both academically and personally. She joined the Mathletes team, helping lead them to victory at regional competitions. She mentored struggling students, turning frustration into understanding with patience and empathy. She challenged herself with increasingly difficult coursework, pushing the boundaries of what she thought possible. Through it all, she carried with her the memory of that fateful day in Mr. Peterson's classroom, a reminder that even the simplest acts of courage can spark extraordinary change. Redemption for Emily wasn't about proving her worth to others. It was about reclaiming her sense of self-worth. Respect, similarly, wasn't something she sought. It was something she earned, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through quiet determination and unwavering authenticity. And as she walked the halls of Westridge High, no longer blending into the background but standing tall amidst whispers of admiration, Emily knew she had found her place in the world. The aftermath of Emily's calculus triumph marked more than just a moment of personal vindication. It signaled the dawn of a new chapter in her life, one defined by growth, purpose, and an unshakable belief in herself. What began as a single act of defiance against invisibility blossomed into a journey of self-discovery, transforming not only how others saw her but also how she viewed herself. This transformation wasn't instantaneous. It unfolded gradually, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a stormy sky, illuminating paths she had never dared to tread before. Emily's newfound confidence became the cornerstone of her identity. No longer content to linger on the sidelines, she embraced opportunities that once seemed daunting or out of reach. Her participation in the debate club, for instance, evolved from tentative curiosity into passionate engagement. At first, standing in front of judges and opponents felt unnatural. Her voice trembled, and her palms sweated as she fumbled through arguments. But with each competition, she grew bolder, learning to channel her analytical mind into persuasive rhetoric. By the end of the school year, she had earned accolades at regional tournaments, earning recognition not just for her intellect, but for her poise under pressure. Debate taught her something invaluable: that her voice mattered, and that speaking up didn't diminish her authenticity, it amplified it. Her academic pursuits mirrored this evolution. Encouraged by Mrs. Alvarez, Emily enrolled in advanced placement courses, diving headfirst into subjects that challenged even the brightest students. She tackled multivariable calculus, quantum mechanics, and abstract algebra with the same fervor she once reserved for solitary study sessions. These classes weren't easy. They demanded long nights spent poring over textbooks and countless hours grappling with complex theories. But they ignited a fire within her. For the first time, Emily realized that intelligence wasn't static. It was malleable, shaped by effort and perseverance. Every problem she solved, every concept she mastered, reinforced her belief that she was capable of achieving greatness. Beyond academics, Emily discovered a passion for teaching, a calling that allowed her to merge her love for mathematics with her desire to inspire others. Her volunteer work at the library expanded into a formal tutoring program, where she mentored students struggling with STEM subjects. She approached these sessions with empathy and patience, understanding firsthand what it felt like to be underestimated. One student, a shy seventh grader named Liam, reminded Emily so much of her younger self that she went above and beyond to help him succeed. When Liam aced his first math test after months of hard work, he handed her a handmade card that read, "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Holding the card, Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not because of sadness, but because of gratitude. Teaching others had become her way of paying forward the kindness she wished she'd received sooner. Her relationships with her peers deepened as well, evolving from cautious curiosity into genuine camaraderie. The classmates who had once dismissed her as too quiet now sought her out for advice, whether it was about homework, college applications, or simply navigating the complexities of high school life. Sarah Collins, the ambitious valedictorian-in-waiting, struck up a friendship with Emily after bonding over their shared interest in mathematics. Together, they formed a study group that attracted some of the brightest minds in the school. Through these interactions, Emily learned that connection wasn't about fitting in. It was about finding people who appreciated her for who she truly was. Even Jake Thompson, the star quarterback who had once teased her for being too shy to speak up, became one of her closest allies. After working together during tutoring sessions, he developed a newfound respect for her intellect and determination. "You're like, secretly awesome," he admitted one day, grinning sheepishly. Emily laughed, realizing how far they had come since those early days of awkwardness and misunderstanding. Their friendship proved that differences didn't have to divide. They could unite, creating bonds stronger than either of them had imagined. Mr. Peterson, too, underwent a quiet evolution in his relationship with Emily. Though he never explicitly apologized for his initial attempt to humiliate her, his actions spoke volumes. He began assigning her extra credit problems designed to stretch her abilities, treating her not as a student to be tested, but as a peer to be challenged. On one occasion, He even invited her to present a guest lecture to the class on spherical coordinates, the very method she had used to solve his impossible equation. As Emily stood at the front of the room, explaining the intricacies of triple integrals with clarity and confidence, she caught Mr. Peterson watching her with something akin to pride. It was a small but significant gesture, a tacit acknowledgement that she had earned his respect, not through confrontation, but through sheer brilliance. As graduation approached, Emily reflected on how far she had come since that fateful day in Mr. Peterson's classroom. She thought back to the girl she used to be, the one who doubted her worth, who hid her talents behind a veil of silence, who feared judgment more than anything else. That girl still existed within her, but she no longer held sway over Emily's choices or aspirations. Instead, she had been replaced by someone stronger, braver, and infinitely more self-assured. Emily knew that challenges lay ahead. College would bring its own set of obstacles, and the world beyond Westbridge High would test her resilience in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But she faced these uncertainties with optimism, confident in her ability to adapt and thrive. On the night of her graduation ceremony, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Emily paused for a moment to scan the audience. She spotted her parents wiping away tears, her brother cheering wildly, and even Mia, the little girl from the library, clutching a homemade sign that read, "We love you, Miss Emily." Most importantly, she saw herself, not the version she had been at the start of her journey, but the person she had become, a leader, a mentor, and a beacon of inspiration for anyone who had ever felt invisible. When the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Emily lingered on the football field, gazing up at the stars twinkling overhead. She thought about all the possibilities awaiting her, new schools, new friendships, new adventures, and felt a surge of excitement. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that she was capable of overcoming any obstacle. In that moment, standing beneath the vast expanse of the night sky, Emily Carter knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning.